It's time to gather up Gotchard. Hey, we just came out of a fun little side story, and it feels like we're probably gonna get into some more deep story shit on episode 30, cause school's back in session. They had a vacation. That explains why they weren't concerned about any of that at all. But they're back at school. Everybody's hanging out in the classroom. Kajuki's there, and him and Hotaro have just fun little conversation. Rinne is just like, I have friends. This is good. Minato starts the class and goes like, "Hey, we got a transfer student," and it's just this new girl, and it's just like, "All right, hey, what's up?" And apparently, she's a childhood friend of Hotaro. And it's just like, oh, they're playing into that trope. Wow, that's fun and neat. Rinne gives a concerned look in the background. And we cut back from the intro as Kajuki and Hotaro have a brief conversation. First things first, referencing Kajuki's long-distance girlfriend. They're still together. Good job, Kajuki. A lot more mature than I thought you were, you know? But they're goofing, they're joshing, they're just having a good old time. They're joking like bros do, you know? Of just like, oh man, if you got a girlfriend, what's gonna happen to me? You know, that kind of... If you are a dude, you know the jokes that these guys are throwing out. Right? Rinne's about to go up and join the conversation, but the transfer student walks up to Hotaro and immediately starts a conversation, and Rinne is uncomfortable, is unsure, a lot of interesting emotions being played with here. Atropos is going like, they fucking killed my dad. Oh, fuck them. It fuses several of the golden homunculi to make a big giant homunculi to be never-present amalgam. And several of the clubs are trying to give presentations of like, hey, you should join us, and Hotaro and Rinne are just having like a fun little back and forth the way they do, of Hotaro being a little bit bigger personality, Rinne being like, oh, you and your big personality, and they're getting along. And the transfer student has the time to look despondent and uncomfortable as a classmate of Hotaro and Rinne's comes onto the stage and goes like, hey, do you want to join theater club? Would you join if I get down on all fours and beg you? And Rinne and Hotaro are just like, oh, jeez, this guy's probably needs some help. They go talk to him, and he's like, I really want the club to succeed. I was really inspired when I went and saw Romeo and Juliet, but there's not enough club members to keep it going. And of course, Hotaro immediately volunteers everybody. But unlike earlier in the season where Rinne would immediately go like, Hotaro, what are you doing? This isn't... Rinne's immediately on board because she understands what Hotaro's going on about and where his brain is. All this kind of stuff. She's on board. But when the guy says like, oh, Hotaro, you'll be Romeo. And he's like, alright, sure, I'll be Romeo. And he goes, Rinne, you'll be Juliet. She immediately was like, whoa, hold on. That's timeout, buddy. I don't know if I could do that. The transfer girl comes in and immediately goes like, I'll be Juliet. And starts leaning on the arm of Hotaro, again, making Rinne look uncomfortable. We're back at the Academy of Alchemy shit. Minato walks in, and hey, look, Lotsis is there. She's officially joined the crew to an extent. But they're just having a conversation. Minato thanks her for letting him get into the Ouroboros land to complete his character arc, and she's like, no problem. But that's when Clotho comes in and goes like, hey, I need to bring you home. Atropos says she forgives you, and Lotsis literally goes, she wanted to kill me. I don't trust that anymore. I'm not going with you. There's a little bit of a fight. Clotho transforms into Dread. Valvrad comes in. They have a fun fight in a very what looks upscale parking garage. Wow, that's a very classy parking garage. But it's a lot of big fight, back and forth. And eventually Valvarad does get Clotho on the back foot. And before he can finish her off, Lotch just steps in and goes like, hey, I may not want to have anything to do with them, but I don't want you to kill them. And they're like, all right, okay. Minato basically throws down a smoke grenade. They all get away, and Clotho rages in desperation, just screaming out. We're now at Hotaro's family's restaurant. They're wrapping Sabimaru and Ringe into this whole shenanigans, and they explain Romeo and Juliet for all the kids who have never seen it. But we all know Romeo and Juliet because I'm an American and I'm speaking to what I assume is a mostly Western audience. And there's several more discussions about Romeo, about who's playing Romeo, who's playing Juliet, all this kind of stuff. Transfer student comes in and goes like, I'm playing Juliet, because everyone immediately thinks Rinne's playing Juliet. And Ringe immediately goes like, uh-oh, spicy's about to happen. Ooh, oh no, gossipy. I don't think it's gossip, there's more of like, oh, I'm friends with Rinne, and this transfer student's stepping on her space. And it's just like, oh. Especially because, again, we keep seeing Rinne, we cutting to Rinne, and she's very uncomfortable. She's not sure what to do. She's not sure what to say. And it's just a lot of little things like that, right? And Rinne's off on her own, just kind of like trying to process her feelings, process her emotions. When the transfer student immediately comes to poke the fucking bear. And just goes like, hey, are you and Hotaro dating? And Rinne's like, no, what? Transfer student just immediately goes like, oh, that means I can. And Rinne is just full of very complex emotions, just unsure of what to do, unsure of what to say. And that's when Atropos shows up and goes like, hey, I'm here to personally fuck with you, Rinne. Does all the things that you would expect of just like, oh, hey, transfer student, random civilian, she's lying to you. She's being a bitch, actually. She wanted me to do this to you. And, like, Rinne already in an uncomfortable position that she doesn't like being in. And now also having all this extra layers of stuff kind of starts shutting down. She's very overwhelmed, very... like all this kind of stuff, and then the civilian gets hurt, and the transfer student gets hurt, and Rinne is just immediately she is not in a great place. She transforms, tries her best to fight the Blizzard Amalgam, so we can unfreeze her if we can unfreeze the transfer student if we need to, but Rinne is on the back foot. She's not able to handle this right now. Understandable. She's in a lot of emotional turmoil places, and a civilian got hurt on her watch. She's in a vulnerable place right now. Hotaro is able to, however, come in, help out Rinne. He's like, hey, Rinne, I'm here to help you. You know, just like good old Hotaro does. And you understand, like, why these two girls are attached to Hotaro. One is attracted to Hotaro, and we'll get into Rinne in a moment. Rinne gets knocked out of transformation, and Gotchard is encased in ice, and that's where we leave this episode, with Rinne very much in an uncomfortable, unsure place, in a very bad place. And it's really interesting that we're diving into some neat ideas. First things first, we've been talking about empathy, but there's other aspects of just like being in touch with emotions and connecting to other people, is that you may also land on things such as like jealousy or envy, such as both Rinne and the transfer student feeling that way about the other, of wanting to monopolize being by Hotaro's side, essentially, that kind of thing. Like, Rinne is just very comfortable with Hotaro because Hotaro pushes her beyond her boundaries, but in a way that Rinne understands, in a way that, like, Hotaro understands, that he can't just keep pushing. It's like there's a give and take, and there's that kind of layer, and they're both wanting to have that position next to Hotaro, while one is very clear in understanding that she wants to be with him romantically. Rinne is very unsure. It may also just be like a moment of just not even being aware that she may have wanted that as a possibility. But we'll get more into that. There's also elements of guilt of Rinne being in her own headspace, being overwhelmed, and then someone getting hurt and her feeling guilty over being, like, not able to control the situation, right? Because that's been a very constant element of Rinne, of wanting to control the situation. We saw that in the early parts of the wrestler episode. She was like, this is dumb, this is silly, and Hotaro's just like, no, we can do this. And through the process of the episode, she's able to reach more of an equilibrium and all this kind of stuff. But all this, Rinne being unsure of how to talk, how to communicate, how to socialize in this new situation, everything's changed, she's getting overwhelmed. It really does mix in well with kind of like our little theory crafting group of these videos and these comments of Rinne being autistic coded. You know, it's interesting to see this kind of play out, and it just makes me go like, oh no, having a hard time reading social situations, you know? Like, that's what I saw with the uncomfortability of, she doesn't know how to step into this new paradigm. And it's also interesting to see a lot of like genuine teen angst of social situations changing and not knowing how to fully explore them, the changings of relationships, of friendship and romance, and what do these possibilities mean, and all these kind of things. Also, just putting yourself out there, that they're about to be putting on a play, helping a guy out. Helping someone out is putting yourself out there in a way, but they're able to easily accomplish that because they're good people. But performing for others, having that judgment onto them, that's something that they're still trying to tackle with, trying to be comfortable with. And Hotaro, even he's like, oh, whoa, you want me to be okay? I guess I can do that, you know? Hotaro has an easier time dealing with being open and putting himself out there, and Rinne doesn't. We see this repeatedly throughout the show, that she's a very quiet person, very reserved person, and it takes Rinne and Hotaro to kind of pull that out of her, of being more open, being more willing to participate in things, right? And it's just really interesting to see. And we also continue like certain aspects of negative empathy with Lotchsis, right? Because there's no easier way to put this. Lotchsis is kind of doing the whole no contact with an abusive family thing. And while she recognizes the abuse that she suffered with the family, she ultimately doesn't want Clotho to get hurt, because Clotho's just as much a victim as she is, but she's still lost in the sauce, all this kind of things. She doesn't want them to get hurt, but she doesn't want to be near them anymore for her to get hurt, you know? And that feels very reminiscent of a lot of people's stories of going no contact with shitty family, right? There's a lot of interesting nuance going on in this episode, really hammering home understanding each other and empathy and all this different kinds of stuff, because there's also another layer here of, in the final confrontation with Rinne being overwhelmed, there's another thing overwhelming her. It's that Atropos literally says, I'm doing this because you hurt my father. And Rinne's like, oh shit, I see myself in you now. And there's that disconnect, and like on layer of emotional complexity on top of emotional complexity, that's really, rich, you know? Rich for a kid show. It's not like, we're not talking about the Marianas Trench, but we are talking about, like, a pretty deep stuff for, like, kids to immediately grasp and handle, you know? It's really cool. This was a pretty dang good episode. Super nice to get back into the school environment. Just a fun little cozy, comfy place to be. The dynamics were fun. It's great to see Kachiki and Hotaro just be like bros, just be like dudes hanging out. Just good vibes. And just everybody trying to be good classmates and friends to the theater dude. It's all cool. Not a super ton of action, but we did get two really good. We got one really good fight scene with Valvrad and Dread, and we got a little cat and mouse at the end. So overall, it's pretty good. That's just being a part of the crew is cool. Glad to see that. Glad to see that her dynamic with Spanner is still going on. A very like teasing back and forth. And the angst Rinne's kind of going through is displayed really well. You feel her uncomfortability with the whole situation just as much as anything. Also, just real quick, one great shot I want to mention is after the Clotho Spanner fight, when they all are able to get away, Clotho just sitting in that wide shot in that parking garage, just screaming that essentially what she sees as like her perfectly fine family is breaking apart because she's unable to fully cognitize the abuse that Lotsis suffered, right? Like, that lack of empathy hurts her because she's unable to understand, like, why is her family breaking apart? And, you know, just a lot of interesting nuance and things to play with going forward and Gotchard. And if you want to be up to date on things going forward, wow, that wasn't clunky, but it wasn't great. Who knows? We'll talk about we'll think. Who knows? Am I good at this? Is this? Am I a value to society? Who knows? You can follow me on social media platforms. Links, as always, are in the description. And if you like videos like this, and you would like to see more for as little as $1 a month, you get an exclusive review of a different tokusatsu show, as it is right now, weekly. Talking about Kamen Rider Akito, as well as Patreon exclusive podcasts and early access to video essays, including the one coming out this Friday. Wahoo! Finally got one made. I'm proud of it. I think it turns out really good, but if you want to see it early, you can go support me on Patreon. And in the meantime, as always, we have some comments. First up from just some random guy. Yeah, thinking about like the amalgams having different motivations and the way this one kind of turned out, it feels very much like this. Like that's this season's good monster trope. You know, like Kamen Rider season said to have a good monster episode to show that they're not all mean. Only the mean ones are mean. And I think this is an interesting way to take that good monster trope and giving the spotlight to Rinne. So I always love it when side characters like that get more meat to chew on. You know, just like, hey, look, hey, Jimmy Olsen, here's an issue of Superman for you. You know, or Bob Babowski. You know, Bibbo Babowski. That's his full name. If you aren't aware, Bibbo Babowski is just a dude who runs a dive bar in Metropolis who's just a really big fan of Superman. I love Bibbo Babowski. He's a fun character. But next up from Fish Pop. Yeah, it's not often we see that kind of like wire foo that we saw from Ghost in the Drive movie. And the Fox amalgam we saw the last week. Because I bet it cost a goddamn pretty penny to implement. But, yeah, no, seeing this Malcolm be kind of fun and creepy is really cool. Like, it really hammers in the bad guy vibes before the twist, the reveal of, like, no, it was trying to do good the whole time. You know? It's interesting. And finally, from Esconde. Don't worry about leaving comments at weird times, my dude. It's all fun. It's all for games. It's all for like, haha, we're just enjoying ourselves, right? But yeah, no, the Amalgam, like I said earlier, feels very much like that was the season's good guy Amalgam, you know, like the Burger Time dude from Xade, you know. But hey, with Kajiki back this episode, I hope to God we get to see some of his like part-time job with the dude and just being a weirdo detectives. They were such a fun duo for that episode. Please let it continue. Please, 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 please. But sadly to say, this video cannot continue because we're done. We've talked about all the comments. We talked about the show. We talked about our theories of where things may go. In the meantime, I hope you have a good day. I hope you have a good rest of the week. And I hope you do good for someone else. Big thank you to my supporters, Esconde and Scott Firestein.